Okay, we're live.
Okay, I'll now call the Planning Committee meeting to order. Welcome everybody to our virtual Planning Committee meeting. Our third meeting in 3 nights for members of Barrie City Council is a very special meeting. This is the public meeting for the new draft official plan for the city of Barrie. We do not have any items, any approval items on tonight's agenda, so I won't need to go through the consent agenda. We will just go straight into the one item, which is the public meeting. Although registration prior to the meeting was encouraged, and we do have a large number of people who have registered, if you've not yet registered and you wish to speak, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca. That's all one word, cityclerks@barrie.ca, or call 797-5353, and staff will send you the information required to participate in the meeting. We do ask that anyone who's registered and speaking tonight just make sure they've got enough charge on their cell phone so that it doesn't drop off in the middle of your comments. We do want to be able to hear them all. The purpose of tonight's public meeting is for city staff to present the new draft official plan and give the public an opportunity to make comments regarding that draft of the plan. The official plan is one of the most important documents that guides development and, in fact, land use and many more aspects of life in the city of Barrie. It's a long-range vision, a strategy for how land will be used within the municipality, and it, of course, contains a whole bunch of maps, which is exciting for all of us who love maps, but the text is where we will find all the policies that guide land uses in the city of Barrie, and will guide our growth and development for decades yet to come. It really is both an application of provincial and municipal planning policy and really a statement about the future that we want for our community. Members of Planning Committee tonight will be listening to the comments from the public. We won't be debating anything tonight or making comments on the draft plan, but as this is a matter of general applicability, we will all have the opportunity to ask any questions of clarification of staff after the public comments. Of course, members of council will have the opportunity through the ongoing process and have had a number of opportunities already for us to provide comments to staff, and with the document this detailed, we certainly wouldn't get to all those comments or details tonight, but if there are matters for clarification, members of Planning Committee can raise that at the end of the meeting and get some answers from our staff. Ms. Banfield, Director of Development Services, could you confirm that notification for this meeting was conducted in accordance with the Planning Act?
Yes, Mayor Lehman, it was.
Thank you very much. And it is indeed Ms. Banfield, as the chief architect of our new official plan, who will be presenting the draft to us tonight. So I will now hand it over to you, Michelle, to present the draft plan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lehman, and welcome to everybody that has joined us this evening. I'm going to start off with a very short video, and we will get this started.
Barrie is a rapidly growing city that will see many changes in the year to come. We are on the cusp of major growth, and we need to grow responsibly to ensure we remain a vibrant, connected, diverse, green, and resilient community. To do this, we want you involved in the city's new official plan. It's a roadmap to our future. The plan provides the direction for Barrie's growth for the next 20+ years. The plan responds to our community's land use, development, and conservation goals. We want to plan for responsible growth with community input. The official plan will help us do this as it reflects our needs and hopes for our city. A great city doesn't just happen. We must plan for it. The plan will make sure that residents, businesses, and the entire city share a vision for the future. It impacts the types of housing, where you work, how you travel, and how you enjoy and live in our city. So how do you get involved? Well, we've been asking you what you think for a couple of years now, and now is the time to see if we've got it right. Look at your neighborhood and your favorite spaces in the city and see if the proposed policy structure matches your vision for the city. We welcome your feedback and we want to ensure we get this right. It's about how you live, work, enjoy, and connect. Get involved.
So that's the short version of the video. The YouTube link underneath is actually a little bit longer that goes into a bit more detail, but for this evening we did the truncated version. And to get to a new official plan, there are several things that we must do, and those are tied a lot to our responsibilities to provincial policy and all the different types of that. So, there are statutory things that we must do. Tonight is actually one of those exercises. The open house a couple weeks ago, conforming all of what we're going to present to provincial policy, and as well, meeting this conformity deadline of July 1st, 2022. But to just tick those boxes wouldn't get us to the plan that we actually want. And there are so many things in formulating this plan that we really wanted to do. And it's been a really great process up until now. We've met and discussed countless number of hours with residents and businesses. We've continuously learned what's important to people, to our community, and we've continually looked at ways to creatively engage with our community, because it does come down to this plan providing a place for people and jobs for the future of the city of Barrie. And we are planning in this official plan to that bottom number that you see there, that 2051 target of people and jobs, 298,000 people and 150,000 jobs. And those are the numbers in provincial policy, and those are the numbers that this plan is looking to accommodate within the city of Barrie boundaries. And so it has been a journey to get here this evening and all along the key milestones for this project, but the guiding principles have stayed the same. Understanding that this is a transformative official plan, that it really was based on broad community engagement. We worked with not only our external stakeholders and our community, but even internally to recognize all the great work that the corporation itself is doing, and really worked to make the vision and direction clear for everyone. And then it is, again, a growth management strategy to get Barrie, to guide Barrie's growth rather for the next 30 years. But 2019, 2020, 21, you can see some of the key milestones that started off the project. And as you can see, the different milestones that happened up until even where we are today, which is the midpoint of 2021. And ultimately, that's what got us started, was this community engagement. And look at these pictures. I'm looking at these pictures of in-person community engagement, but that's how it started, folks. And what we heard from the community back then was really that, we know that growth is coming and it has to be accommodated. And it really is an opportunity to shape our community for the future. And so the early engagement really did set the foundation for this plan. And the reoccurring themes really tied on us wanting to protect and enhance what we have, but then also use this new official plan to build on that. And it doesn't matter what area you're looking at, whether it's jobs or housing or the environment, protect and enhance what we have and really look at and improving with this new official plan. And as I said, it became quite clear the different themes that were important to our community. Those themes fed directly into our discussion papers and then ended up ultimately becoming part of the official plan. So the comments that we received on from draft one, very thoughtful, lots of comments, individual submissions as that totaled well over 700 pages, and staff, myself included, spent countless number of hours meeting with people, presenting and sharing the news about the new official plan. And definitely, heard again those themes still being very important to people: housing and jobs and housing affordability, mixed use projects, continuing to protect and enhance our cultural heritage, our public spaces, as well as the natural environment and our waterfront, as well as looking at all forms of mobility for our municipality now and into the future. We also heard some site-specific details of people, their own particular properties, and we did hear some comments about the settlement boundary, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's so poignant. Because if we take a look at some of the main changes between draft one and draft two, just when draft one was first produced, we were dealing with one growth plan that had numbers to 2041. And we knew all along that our second draft was going to have to include the 2051 numbers, if you will. So that's one of the big changes. And as that ties into the settlement boundary, and that to accommodate that 2051 growth, the settlement boundary is now the city's municipal boundary. Some of the changes between draft one and draft two tie into some revised phasing in our secondary plan areas, the areas at the south end of the city, and some corrections and oversights, because despite the most cautious of reviews, there's always things like that to catch, and we're still hearing about them. So chapter 3 really focuses on some urban design. We have streamlined some of our land use designations and our policies. And, early feedback on draft 2 has said that, a lot of people are seeing their comments from draft 1 reflected in draft 2, which is a large part of the point of all of this. The current stats, we're having some great download numbers. We've had some great attendance and registration at our open house a couple weeks ago, and even everybody that's here this evening, which is so very much appreciated. And again, these same kinds of recurring themes we're hearing, and as well, kind of in-house, we have probably at least 60 written submissions in addition to the people that are here this evening. So and likely more will be coming. So really great feedback to work through. Mayor Lehman, you said it yourself, maps are a good place to start when you're looking at an official plan. And I always, encourage people to find themselves in the map, find your house, find where you work, find where you shop, and then look at how those maps kind of all tie into the policies, because the maps visualize the policies. But then there are policies. And again, we've heard lots of people say, how do we tackle this document? And again, find your map and then kind of loop back. And so there's building blocks of the policy, and that's the community structure elements. And then there's a whole bunch of land use policies that get much more specific about height and density and permitted uses, and they all kind of work together. So just using the neighborhood area as an example, a neighborhood area that fronts onto a local road is going to have slightly different policies than a neighborhood area that fronts onto a collector road. And it's going to have slightly different policies than a neighborhood area that fronts onto an intensification corridor. So the maps and policies really, really work together to bring that vision forward. And as we're talking about growth and accommodating the growth, we look at the growth plan that talks about having 50% of that growth accommodated in the built boundary. That's best described as the former city of Barrie, and 50% of that growth to be accommodated in the designated greenfield area. And that's more easily described as the Salem and Hewitt's secondary plan areas. And how that population and employment is distributed, though, will depend on where you are. So again, growth and people and jobs are going to be accommodated differently in a strategic growth area than an intensification corridor, than in an adjacent neighborhood, as well as in some of our neighborhoods that are predominantly single detached homes. That's not to say there's not going to be any growth there, but that growth and density might be felt as second suites or third suites. And this slide really is just kind of trying to bring some of those density numbers to life for everybody. The plan will reference maximum densities and minimum densities and heights. And this really slide just kind of shows how those densities and heights can translate into built form. So just have a few final thoughts for you this evening, recognizing that the city really is in a time of transformation. And this official plan is intended to shape and guide that transformation. It's intended to be thought out and really intended to reflect the vision and the appropriate transitions that we hear are so important from our community. But it really is also trying to harness and unlock rather the opportunities that come with growth and those opportunities for residents and businesses. And then just, with the reality that this is a plan for 30 years. It's not going to happen overnight. We are planning 30 years into the future. And I, ask all of you, think to where you were 30 years ago and your own growth that you've experienced since then. But this isn't going to be our only official plan between now and then. But it is our transformational official plan. It is providing that foundation for that transformation. And that's why this is so important. So tonight, we're here to listen. Like every planning application, every comment we hear, every question will be recorded and responded to when we package all of this up and bring it back to council, still intended to come the fall of 2021. And that's to ask council to adopt the new official plan. And that is going to keep us aligned with that July 1st, 2022 conformity deadline. Because our official plan gets approved by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And so the plan is bringing us into conformity with provincial policy. It's a plan that we all are going to live with. There's no appeals to the minister's decision. And there's a 2-year period that no amendments to the plan following its approval can be considered, subject to receiving a council resolution. But for now, really, the focus is that this is our official plan that we are all going to be living with and implementing. And so we keep saying for this version of the draft, we really want to get it right. We really want to hear from people so that we're able to make sure that the plan that we're adopting and presenting to the minister for approval is the plan that's going to reflect our vision for the community. There is a lot of information on buildingbarrie.ca/official plan. We have a dedicated website. And then again, we are here, what dedicated website, dedicated email address, and we are here to listen this evening. So that does conclude my formal presentation. And I do thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to listen to all the registered speakers this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Banfield. I know there's so much ground to cover when we talk about a document of this size and complexity, but at the core of it is policies and maps and guidelines to structure the evolution and development of the city. I think the way we will proceed tonight is to call people in order that they registered for the public meeting tonight. And then as we get towards the end of that, if there are more who have registered during the meeting, we'll bring them into the call then. So our first registered speaker is Jennifer Van Gennep from Redwood Park Communities. I'll just remind those watching as Jennifer comes into the call that if you are watching and you want to speak tonight, the phone number is 797-5353 or email to cityclerks@barrie.ca. And if we could just ask everybody who comes in to speak to us, it is a formal public meeting under the Planning Act. So we do need your name and address for the record. And with that, Ms. Van Gennep, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Van Gennep, and I live at 29 Twist Drive. And I am speaking to you today. I do work at Redwood Park Communities, but today I am speaking on behalf of the Barrie chapter of the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness. So thank you, Mayor Lehman and Council, for the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding the city's new official plan. On behalf of the Scatterbury chapter, I want to thank city staff for their continued and open engagement on the new official plan throughout the consultation process for this important piece of policy. We have noted previously that as an Alliance to End Homelessness, our primary interest in the official plan is in the policies that will protect existing affordable housing stock and incentivize or require additional affordable housing stock. But it would be actually more accurate to say our primary interest is the people who call Barrie home and their human right to safe and adequate housing that they can afford. We appreciate that our recommendations from Draft 1 have been taken into consideration, and we are happy to see some of them reflected in Draft 2. Affordable housing policies have been pulled into one section for easier reference. There is stronger wording around affordable housing targets as being required rather than encouraged. And there is stronger wording around the protection of affordable housing stock in condominium conversions. We're also pleased to see the addition of a section on protecting vulnerable populations in Draft 2. We submitted some further written recommendations to staff earlier today to strengthen the new OP and make sure that as we look to the future, our planning is resident-centric rather than investor-centric. Throughout this process, it has become clear that the SCADA Barrie chapter plays an important role as a counterbalance to the strong developer voice. And so we wanted to come to give our comments verbally during this meeting as well. Our recommendations on this current draft include a request to add 24/7, 365 days a year public washroom and drinking water access to the plan, alongside staff's inclusion of the provision of warming and cooling centers. We've also suggested a sub-definition of deeply affordable housing to apply to incentive programs, and we've made a request to return to the affordable housing targets laid out in Draft 1 that were scaled back in Draft 2. In Draft 1, we saw a target of 10% affordable housing citywide and 35% requirements in the urban growth centers. Our recommendation last December was to maintain the urban growth center target at 35% and increase the citywide target to 30%. Instead, in Draft 2, we see the citywide target staying at 10% with a drop to 20% target in the urban growth centers and the addition of a 20% target in the 2 major transit station areas. We recognize that much of the development will happen in the major transit station areas and urban growth centers, so this may be a net gain, but we question the reduction from 35% to 20% target. Surely it was not in response to an outcry from the public. We strongly recommend reinstating the 35% target for the urban growth centers based on the fact that affordable housing is defined by the province as what is affordable for those with a household income at or below the 60th percentile or average market rent, whichever is lower. It's important to put the numbers to it, as affordable certainly sounds like a lower threshold than it is. Understand that when developers push back on a target of 35%, they are pushing back on having a third of new 1 and 2 bedroom apartments be at or below the range of $1,600 to $2,000 a month, which presumably means that 2/3 of the new apartments can still be above that. And then you need to ask yourself, who is our city for? Again, this OP should reflect the best interest of Barrie's residents. The new OP sets ambitious targets to encourage social resilience and complete communities where everyone has access to trails, parks, and transit. But ensuring an adequate supply of housing that people across the income spectrum can afford should be the bedrock of any plan for a resilient community. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments and for your consideration of these and other comments related to affordable housing and marginalized populations as you work to develop an official plan that centers and honors the rights and the needs of the people who call Barrie home and allows us all an equal opportunity to participate fully in our community.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Gennep, for those comments and the thoughtful approach to affordable housing, and of course some broader things for us to think about there too. So thank you very much for being here tonight and for giving us those comments.
Thank you.
Our next registered speaker is Corey Chisholm from Mhbc Planning. Mr. Chisholm, welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So good evening, members of council, members of the public, and staff. My name is Corey Chisholm, and I'm a partner with Mhbc Planning here in Barrie. I submitted detailed comments on behalf of a number of our clients ahead of the public meeting tonight. I would like to provide some brief general comments on the second draft of the new OP, and then provide several site-specific comments on behalf of 2 of our clients, those being PBM Realty Holdings Inc. and Skydev Real Estate Development. So my general comments relate to 5 primary areas of concern with the second draft of the OP. The first is the short comment period. The 1-month comment period for the second draft is far too short for a document of this importance and magnitude. The public and stakeholders were provided 3 months to review the first draft in late 2020, which is a more appropriate timeframe. Only having a 1-month window to review the second draft, which has had substantial changes from the first and no formal response to comments, is challenging. It is critical moving forward the public and stakeholders be provided additional time to review the next draft, in addition with the revised urban design guidelines when they become available, as well as a comment response table provided by staff responding to the comments submitted to the second draft. The second general comment I'd like to provide is the importance and weight of the new official plan. Certainly, Manager Banfield and Mayor Lehman spoke to this, but it is extremely important for the public and stakeholders that the new official plan is done right the first time, especially with the restriction under the Planning Act that there is no appeal rights. Manager Banfield also mentioned the 2-year moratorium under the Planning Act for new official plans. And we would request that when a recommendation comes forward to endorse the new official plan and pass it along to the ministry for approval, that the council consider waiving this 2-year moratorium on amendments should there be something that an individual landholder needs to amend in the future. The third general comment is the lack of transition regulations. So the second draft contains currently no transition regulations as an implementation tool. It is therefore unclear how ongoing development applications at various stages of the development approval process will be impacted when the new official plan comes into force effect. It is critical for stakeholders to understand the transition regulations early on so that they can make informed decisions moving forward as it relates to their properties and development aspirations. My fourth general comment relates to the urban design focus. The second draft is very much an urban design based and focused document. However, we do not have the key implementation document to go along with that, which would be the revised urban design guidelines. Understand these are to be provided at some point in the future. In the absence of these, it is impossible to complete a comprehensive review at this point, as many policies within the current second draft of the official plan directly relate and correspond to that urban design guideline document. Finally, the fifth general comment I'd like to provide is regarding the prescriptive nature of the official plan. So there's many policies throughout the second draft which are written in an absolute and prescriptive manner with no flexibility built in, very much like a zoning bylaw. An official plan is meant to provide broad long-term policy direction and provide room for flexible interpretation of policies and goals. As the second draft is currently written, most modern development applications moving forward would likely require an official plan amendment to proceed. One example of this is section 2633D, which mandates high density development with a residential component to have a minimum residential density of 300 units per hectare. Many sites will not be able to achieve this density on a site-by-site basis, while others will be able to far exceed it. This should be written as a general target and not an absolute requirement. This would also remove flexibility for potential mixed-use buildings that are primarily commercial and office to incorporate a small residential component, such as along Dunlop Street through the downtown, where it would be very challenging for any site to achieve a density of 300 UPH when much of the current and traditional built form seen along Dunlop Street is 3 to 4 stories in height. So moving to the site-specific comments I'd like to make tonight, my first comments are on behalf of PBM Realty Holdings, Inc. We did provide detailed written comments related to 7 different properties PBMR owns within the city of Barrie. I'll just touch on a couple main comments. One of our primary concerns relates to permitted uses. There are some wholesale changes in land use designations proposed that will have the effect of altering the range of uses permitted on PBMR's properties. And it is requested that all existing land use permissions in the current OP be carried forward in the new official plan. For example, 2 of PBMR's land holdings, 364 St. Vincent Street and 30 Alliance Boulevard, are located within the proposed Strategic Economic Employment District, or SEED designation, and currently have OP permissions for and are being used for industrial purposes. And the SEED designation proposes to remove these industrial use permissions within the new OP. While PBMR is supportive of some of the expanded use permissions within the SEED designation in the long term, it is critical for their business and the tenants that the existing use permissions be carried forward. Additionally, for PBMR's 4 other industrial land holdings within the city of Barrie, which includes 49 Truman Road, 125 Brock Street, 168 Tiffin Street, and 191 John Street, the proposed employment area industrial designation appears to narrow the permitted uses from what exists today. Combined, these land holdings accommodate hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs within the city, and it is important for these to be carried forward. Limiting the permitted uses on these properties would appear to be contrary to some of the economic prosperity goals within the draft official plan. Finally, as it relates to PBMR's property at 217 Dunlop Street East, we have concerns with many of the overly prescriptive design policies applicable to the urban growth center and as well as high density developments, and are seeking confirmation from the city that if specific criteria cannot be met based on site-specific conditions, then an official plan amendment is not required as long as it can be demonstrated the intent of this policy is being met. Moving forward, we hope to schedule a working meeting with city staff to work through these comments as well as the balance of our written comments ahead of the next draft of the new official plan. The second landowner I would like to provide site-specific comments for is in regards to Skydev and their land holding at 10 to 24 Grove Street, which is the former YMCA site. Skydev is a developer of purpose-built rental projects in communities across Ontario and recently acquired this site earlier this year and are actively working through the site plan approval process with city staff. Similarly, we have provided detailed written comments, but there are two main points I would like to speak to this evening. The first relates to recognition of existing approvals. Our client's primary concern with the second draft of the new official plan is that it does not clearly identify or carry forward the existing OP and zoning bylaw permissions that exist on their lands. As the city is aware, these lands received site-specific OPA and ZBA approvals back in 2018. Our client acquired these lands in early 2021 and have been actively working through the site plan approval process for a large purpose-built rental apartment project. Many of the specific proposed design policies within the second draft are of concern and contrary to some of the existing site-specific approvals and permissions in place today that were just approved a few years ago, and which form the basis for the ongoing site plan approval process we are working through. It is therefore requested that the property be identified on map 2 as a defined policy area and all site-specific permissions be recognized and carried forward within section 2.8 defined policy areas. The second comment relates to the proposed affordable housing policies. While we acknowledge that providing affordable housing throughout the city is certainly an important objective and mandate, the mandatory provision for affordable housing in all new larger scale developments is challenging and of concern to our client. All developments are not necessarily conducive to incorporating truly affordable housing due to building type, tenure, location, proximity to supportive amenities, and financial feasibility. Additionally, by mandating each development to include a prescribed amount of affordable units without any sort of funding will likely at the same time increase the cost or the rent of the remaining market units in that same development, which would be working against this objective. It is requested these policies not be prescriptive for all developments on a site-by-site basis and also be subject to available funding, which we know is an approach the city has taken in the past. We also look forward to meeting with city staff to work through these comments as well as the balance of our comments submitted on this site. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear the comments provided this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chisholm, for the broad comments as well as the site-specific ones. And I think we have one of your colleagues next at Mhbc, Mr. Wes Crown. He's our next registered speaker. Mr. Crown, welcome to Planning Committee of Barrie City Council. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Good to see you again, members of council and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As noted, my name is Wes Crown. I'm an associate with Mhbc Planning at 113 Collier Street here in the city of Barrie and represent the owners of the property at 220 Mapleview Drive, John Mark Holdings, Inc. Your worship, the obligations on the city to have a fair, open, transparent, replicable, and traceable process in preparing a new official plan has always been clear. But with the recent changes to the Act in regards to the adoption, approval, no appeals, and no amendments to new official plans, these obligations have been heightened and making it even more critical that staff and council take the time to get it right at the local stage prior to adoption. We have provided written comments to the city on behalf of our clients regarding draft 1 on December 16th of 2020. We also provided written comments to council and staff regarding draft 2 on May 27th, 2021, prior to tonight's meeting. We've made a request on behalf of our clients to change the land use designation for their property that we believe that is not only in our client's interest and makes good planning sense, but more importantly is also in the clear public interest of the city and the planning goals and objectives that are contained in the new official plan. We trust that council will agree with this change and incorporate it in the plan prior to adoption. We look forward to continuing to work with city staff, with Michelle and Tomas, and to help them and council get the new official plan right. Thank you again, and I've tried to keep my comments short, Your Worship, understanding this is the third of 3 meetings this week, and you've got another one tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, we do understand you being here to represent those interests, Mr. Crown, and as somebody who's been through many official plans yourself. Thanks for being here tonight and participating in the meeting.
Thank you again.
Pardon me. Okay, just going back to my list here. Our next registered speaker, I believe, is John McDermott, McDermott and Associates. Mr. McDermott, welcome to Planning Committee, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can everybody hear me
We can
okay?
hear you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is John McDermott. I'm a registered professional planner practicing in the province of Ontario. This evening, I am appearing before the committee on behalf of 1287363 Ontario Limited, the owner of the Dunlop Village Plaza, municipal address of 304 Dunlop Street West. Following our attendance at the virtual public open house on May the 19th, we prepared a detailed written submission dated May 31st concerning the policies and designations set out in the draft official plan, which would apply to the use and development of our clients' land holdings. I trust that copies of that submission have been circulated to the members of the committee. Through our submission, we identified various matters of primary and secondary significance for review and consideration by members of the committee and staff. The primary purpose of appearing before the committee this evening is to summarize those issues and to answer any questions which you may have in relation to the detailed written submission. With respect to maps 1, 2, 3, and 4, summarizing our concerns, they arise from a review of the policies applicable to strategic growth areas, strategic economic and employment districts, and the policies applicable to those lands adjacent freight supportive corridors, and the uncertainty which results in relation to the use of those lands situated adjacent to the northerly limits of Dunlop Street West between Ann Street and the Highway 400 corridor. Excuse me. The policies applicable to a strategic growth area speak to intensification of the built form to include high density, transit-oriented residential development as part of a mixed-use area with a view to creating a complete community which provides for a range of retail and personal service commercial uses. In contrast, the policies applicable to the Dunlop Street West Strategic Employment and Economic Development District speak to the introduction of industrial clusters, wherein predominantly office uses related to knowledge-based firms and creative industries are to be promoted. The contradiction in the policies is furthered by the designation of Dunlop Street West as a freight supportive corridor and the policies which direct industrial uses to locations adjacent to those corridors. For the reasons set out in detail in our written submission on May 31st, it is respectfully submitted that further refinement of the proposed policies is necessary to avoid the uncertainty and ambiguity which results, and that further the official plan should mandate the preparation of a secondary plan for the Dunlop Street West strategic growth area as opposed to making this a discretionary requirement. Speaking to the issue of Dunlop Street West, the right-of-way requirement, upon review of map 5 to the plan, we noted that there was an inset on the drawing which identifies a 55 meter, that's 180 foot right-of-way requirement for Dunlop Street West between Ann Street and Cedar Point Drive. Based upon our understanding of the various reports and studies which have been advanced by the city in recent years, the studies indicate that the required right-of-way to support this proposed improvements to this section of Dunlop Street is between 37.5 and 41 meters. Upon inquiring as to the basis for establishing a 55-meter right-of-way during the course of the public open house on May 19th, we were advised that this requirement was introduced in accordance with the directions of council. As noted in our written submission, we have requested copies of all such documentation and reports concerning the need for a 55-meter right-of-way, as well as copies of the comments provided by the Ministry of Transportation in relation to the proposed official plan. To date, this information has not been provided. Hopefully it is forthcoming following this meeting this evening in order to avoid the need for the solicitors acting on behalf of our client to file an FOI application requesting a production of such documentation. Next, I'd like to speak to map 6 and the cultural city features and the inclusion of the Dunlop Village Plan Plaza and the adjoining properties as part of the West Village area. And I would submit to council that basically the area to the west of Ann Street and to the north of Dunlop Street does not form part of a well-established community, which is rather the area is isolated and disjointed from the established areas to the east of Ann Street, and that the area is not reflective of valuable cultural heritage resources or groups of buildings and architectural and streetscape elements which are worthy of protection. So we would request that the lands be, the boundary of that West Village be delineated accordingly. In addition to the primary concerns which I've spoken to, we outlined a series of relatively minor secondary concerns, which I hope to be able to deal with staff on in the future weeks before adoption of the plan. And on behalf of our client, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this evening and be pleased to answer any questions which members of the committee may have in relation to our submissions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McDermott. Appreciate you coming and giving your views tonight on that new area, and of course the new designation proposed for the strategic employment district. Next, the speaker we have registered tonight is Rob McFarland. I'm sorry, Rob. Welcome to Planning Committee.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're live.
Good evening, members of committee. My name is Rob McFarland. I'm a planner at Zelinka Preamble in the city of Toronto. My address is 20 Maud Street in Toronto. We represent a number of landowners in the city of Barrie, and we've been actively monitoring the OP process from the onset of the first draft, and we've been monitoring it on behalf of these stakeholders. I just wanted to start by saying we're very encouraged by the ongoing dialogue that we've had with city staff, been very receptive to the comments received to date. We've submitted written comments on both the first draft and now this second draft on behalf of our clients. We're here tonight specifically to discuss concerns by Canadian Tire, our client who we represent in their property that's owned at 75 Mapleview Drive West in the city of Barrie. For some very brief context, the lands are occupied by Canadian Tire, which has a floor area just shy of 7,500 square meters. They're located on the west side of Bryn Drive on the south side of Mapleview Drive West. They're also occupied by various retail pads, currently occupied by a beer store as well as a gas bar. The in effect, for some further context, the in effect official plan designates the Canadian Tire lands as general commercial. That's reflective of their current function as a commercial plaza. The lands are also zoned as general commercial, again reflective of their function as a commercial plaza. Canadian Tire's primary concern and the reason for our attendance this evening is that the draft official plan in this second draft that's been presented for consultation is now proposing to transition these commercial lands into an employment area designation, being specifically the employment area non-industrial designation. Simply put, Canadian Tire does not agree with this designation that staff have proposed for their lands. This has been done without prior consultation or discussion with the landowner. The first draft was a significant difference in terms of what the land use designation was proposed for those Canadian Tire lands. I would reiterate that the proposed designation does not align with the current function of those lands or the intended function of those lands to continue their retail operations and be permitted for possible expansions or improvements in the future. The proposed designation, being the industrial designation, would seek to specifically limit and restrict the types of uses that these lands are currently built for and used for on an ongoing basis. That would include limiting the major retail function as well as the retail pads on site. As part of our background review of the official plan, we took a look at the city's lands needs assessment, which I would note didn't consider these lands as employment lands for the purposes of calculating the land budget. We also note that we didn't see any recommendation or analysis to justify the transitioning of commercial lands, including our clients' lands, to employment lands to satisfy the needs of the city's land budget. So from a lands needs standpoint, we don't see any justification or need for the transitioning of these lands to employment. That being said, we're in the position that we believe it's inappropriate for these lands to be transitioned to an employment area. And I would note that I'm familiar with a few properties in the area that this appears to be a similar context for, where the transitioning of these lands from their current function to a different function is occurring. Our ask tonight, or the reason for our attendance this evening, we've submitted written comments on behalf of Canadian Tire for the same, but we're asking council to consider the context of these lands and possibly provide some direction or consideration to staff to reevaluate what designation would be appropriate for this existing Canadian Tire site. And we simply have to look back to the first draft of the OP from September of 2020. And as I mentioned, those lands in that first draft were, in our view, appropriately designated as a commercial district. So we don't have to look far to see where an appropriate designation would be for these lands. So I won't take up too much of your time. We've requested a meeting with staff to discuss the same. And like I said, we look forward to that discussion. We've had a very productive discussion with staff and do appreciate all of their continued support and discussions that they've been having. So we're going to continue to monitor this OP process and in particular the designation that would apply to this Canadian Tire site, strictly to understand and view how this would impact their future functionality as a commercial center. So with that, we look forward to that ongoing dialogue and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McFarland, for being here and giving us those comments. Our next registered speaker tonight is Ray Duhamel of the Jones Consulting Group. Mr. Duhamel, welcome back to Planning Committee. Twice in 2 nights. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lehman and members of Committee and Council. I represent the Hewitt's Landowners Group. Sorry, I should start with I'm with the Jones Consulting Group. Work address is 229 Mapleview Drive East. I am representing the Hewitt's Landowners Group tonight in providing you some comments. I will be providing written comments following this. I hope to get those up to you tomorrow. But I just wanted to hit on the high notes tonight because we don't need to get into the weeds on individual policies just yet. I wanted to thank staff actually at the starting point publicly, because I think that staff have been working really hard to work with stakeholders that I'm aware of, certainly with myself and others, to try to understand concerns and comments and try to work through. And I think that this document represents a significant improvement over the one that was issued in December. So I think that we're being heard in part. So we really appreciate that. We still think that there's work to go, and staff are obviously have demonstrated willingness to continue to have those dialogues and work forward and discuss going forward. So we appreciate that significantly. What I would like to say, ask Planning Committee specifically, is whether or not you would be willing to consider hosting a third statutory public meeting. There was a tremendous amount of effort put into providing comments on the first draft of the official plan. I think Ms. Banfield's presentation alluded to that, hundreds and hundreds of pages of comments, and staff reworked the document significantly. And as a result, there wasn't, the staff weren't in a position to provide a comment matrix to understand whether there was a disagreement on policies, whether or not there was agreement, but for some reason wasn't changed. We just really weren't able. My letter alone in December was 18 pages long, and some comments were made, some comments were not, and staff doesn't have time at this point yet to go through every single policy and explain why something was or was not changed. So I think the opportunity to get a comment matrix based on the comments received at the second statutory public meeting, issue a revised draft that has a comment matrix, and then provide an opportunity for a second statutory public meeting would be appreciated. I don't think that runs afoul of the timelines that you're talking about, and I think it builds on what even Ms. Banfield presented to Planning Committee last September, that this is all about unparalleled community engagement and a transformative OP. Well, let's get it right. I think a previous speaker spoke to that, and I wholeheartedly support that. Was the alternative is that after the 2-year moratorium on OPAs, you're going to get a raft of OPAs accompanying future applications, And I think we'd all like to avoid that. So I think everybody wins when we work together. And I think a second statutory public meeting would go a long way in helping address that. My third comment, Your Worship, members committee, is that the Hewitts and Salem secondary plans have been removed from this document. And I've made this comment in my previous submission in December. This is a major point of concern of the Hewitts landowners group. There has been hundreds of millions of dollars, and actually could say hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in land and infrastructure and master planning. And we have shovels in the ground and houses being built in significant form going forward. And to abandon that policy framework entirely in favor of the new planning, the new OP is concerning, to say the least. And there's lots of, we respect that there's reasons why some policies need to be updated and reflect, in new vision, new goals, new objectives of the city. That's fair and agreeable. So let's update the secondary plan policies to reflect those things. Let's not basically abandon the Hewitt secondary plan and the Salem secondary plan in whole, and leave it be. So that's a major concern. We'd ask you to reconsider that. My fourth point, and I won't go on for a long time, I promise, but my fourth point is density and built form. I really encourage planning committee and staff to consider the built form that would be implemented as a result of the prescribed densities in this official plan. The OP is quite prescriptive. It speaks to words such as a minimum average density of 50 units per hectare in your neighborhood area. Your neighborhood area is effectively 80%, 70% of the entire city of Barrie. 50 units per hectare is that. I'm not sure I can hit street townhouses at 50 units per hectare. So how do you develop at that density at a minimum when your local streets are required to have a minimum of 50 units per hectare? Your collector and arterial roads are required to have a minimum of 60 units per hectare. Your DGA, your designated greenfield area, has to have 52% high density, which is a minimum of 300 units per hectare. 52% of the designated greenfield area needs to be 300 units per hectare or greater. There's medium density is 125 units per hectare. And then there's a gap in the policies that I couldn't find anyway between 125 and 300. Your major transit station areas are 150 units per hectare in the Barrie South one. Many of those plans are already approved at densities well below 150. It's not, I don't see it's even possible to achieve that density. So I think overall, understanding what the built form is that's being requested at these prescriptive policies, or provide more flexibility in the policy framework so that they're more aspirational and you can achieve them where you can. But otherwise, these are minimum prescribed requirements that are going to be difficult to achieve, and you might not like what you achieve if you do get them. My fifth comment is, I haven't seen, and maybe it has been done, but based on the density projections that are, or the density requirements in the OP, there's going to be significant servicing and utility implications. And so there's millions of dollars of infrastructure being put in the ground today. Will it be able to handle the density that are the minimums that are being put into the OP? I'm not aware that they are. So that's a concern. Mapping, there's a number of mapping inconsistencies in the document, and I want to appreciate that staff have already set up time to go over those and discuss in detail. But for the record, I'm just sharing with it that there is concerns about that. And my last comment is just repeating the one point I said. This document is very prescriptive, and a number of policies are unclear in how it's going to be implemented. All the more reason to have a third draft, have a second statutory public meeting. Let's continue the very positive work that we are doing, working with staff. Staff are reaching out to the extremely wide variety of people, getting all kinds of feedback. Let's not rush to what my concern is, it's rushing to a staff report in September, recommending, or to planning committee in September, recommending approval of the official plan, and not having time to work through a lot of these implementation and detailed policy challenges and mapping issues. So that's all my concerns, Your Worship and members of the planning committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Duhamel. Certainly lots in that, and we will look forward to your correspondence as well. Appreciate you being here tonight. And I believe we have with us next Keith McKinnon, who also has some familiarity with the secondary plan areas. Mr. McKinnon. There we go. Welcome to Planning Committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of Planning Committee, staff, and members of the public. Ray is a tough act to follow, given that he and I have been working together hand in hand with city staff on the official plan. I'd hate to say ditto, but effectively that is that is my response, that everything that Ray has outlined to Planning Committee this evening also echoes that of the Salem landowners group, of which I do represent before you this evening. I guess I just really do also want to just sort of reiterate quickly that, you know, the Salem secondary plan, much like the Hewitt secondary plan, both approved at the same time. We're, you know, finally getting things in the ground. Millions of dollars of infrastructure work is being spent, both by the city and by the landowners, to get these areas moving. And, you know, by removing the Salem and Hewitt secondary plan areas out of the draft official plan, in our view, is effectively like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And, you know, certainly from the Salem landowners' perspective, we do wish to continue with the Salem secondary plan. Absolutely agree with Ray's comment that if there are some things that need to be updated to reflect current policy and vision, absolutely happy to do that. But overall, the effective scheme and development plans that have been approved and are working towards their way to get in the ground so we can start building homes, to have, you know, more people come, live, and enjoy what the city of Barrie has to offer to these future new residents, I think is very important, and we wish to continue with that secondary plan. The other thing I also want to echo as well, just in relation to the neighborhood density, Ray eloquently pointed that out. We have the exact same concerns. Again, we have plans that effectively set out different land uses at 50 units per hectare. I can tell you, you cannot achieve, whether it be singles, semis, or street townhouses in that designation. You definitely are starting to look at higher density. In particular, as an example, stacks and back-to-back townhouses are typically around a 66 units per hectare range. So that's effectively what you'd be looking at in these areas. And I'm not so sure that's ultimately what you want to see happen in these neighborhood areas, especially the new ones in their totality. So with that, Your Worship, I'm happy to continue working with staff. We do appreciate staff's time that they have given to us in conjunction with the Hewitt's group to work through our issues. It has been a bit of a slog going through this version without a comment matrix or a track change version, but we have been diligently working through that, and also will be providing our written submission to the city before end of week so that we do have a formal representation. But again, on behalf of the Salem Landowners Group, we just wanted to provide a representation before Planning Committee tonight. And I guess I do also agree with Mr. Duhamel that if there was a second public meeting that could be scheduled with a next draft that outlines the changes that have been made and the reasons for that, we too would also be appreciative of that. So with that, Your Worship, thank you for your time this evening. It is much appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McKinnon. Appreciate all of those comments. And again, we'll look forward to the written submission. Next, we have Sandy Fisher. Welcome to Planning Committee. I think we've got you live.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yep, we
Sandy
can hear
Fisher at 31 Wildflower Court.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a lot of my concerns have been discussed. One of the issues that I still see are not in the main corridor areas regarding higher density housing, but in communities that back onto wider roads, like a cul-de-sac backing onto a wider road could be subject to a home sale at the end of that backs onto that road, could become a different zoning, go under a different zoning amendment and be built. And this has been a concern for a lot of neighbors, that are our neighborhoods at risk because we're older neighborhoods and backing onto some of these higher traffic areas. So that's one. The other is, it still kind of revolves for me around the cultural heritage, archaeological site, and water conservation. And the provincial policy statement is very broad. The Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, and Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, and the Stormwater Management Master Plan, they all are somewhat in line. And it's basically revolving around, protecting these areas. And the wording is in there. It is something that is supposed to be observed and protected, and they are being built on. So, I really don't know that much about these fields. I'm just concerned about the possibility of contamination in these areas that are supposed to be protected. And so that's basically my main concern. I'm not going to go into detail because there's a lot of other people that want to discuss this, but the wording hasn't changed at all. And yet, our neighborhood has experienced problems and that have not been dealt with and have not been managed following like interventions being put into place. Or followed up on after those interventions have been put into place where they have failed. And so with a new development down the road, and that further causing problems, it just, to me, doesn't make sense because it's already documented in policies to be followed, and it doesn't appear to be followed. And so my concern is compliance, and whether the right qualified people are making the decisions, for these developments on these recharge areas or cultural areas. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Fisher. Thank you for being here tonight to give us those comments. We'll move to our next speaker, which is Amanda Santo. Santo, welcome to Planning Committee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and members of the committee. My name is Amanda Santo, and I'm with Dorsey Development Corporation. We are a landowner in the eastern portion of the Hewitt Secondary Plan area. Our office address is 130 Adelaide Street West, Suite 2200 in Toronto. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I would like to say just a few words at a very high level, and we'll leave the bulk of our feedback to our land use planner, Matthew Corey of Malone Givens Parsons, who I believe will be speaking next. I would first like to take this opportunity to thank staff for what is unquestionably a tremendous amount of work that has gone into this second draft of the official plan. We look forward to continuing to work with staff and, as per Michelle's presentation, to get it right. This is a tremendously important document, and it is imperative that we do get it right. As landowners and community builders in Barrie, we see ourselves as partners with the city. We are here to build communities together. We also appreciate the significant number of changes that have been made thus far, addressing many comments and concerns we and other stakeholders have previously outlined. That said, there is still more work to be done. The policies and objectives of the plan require more collaboration and massaging to truly be achieved. In order to set Barrie up for success in getting that good mix of housing, in achieving true affordability, and seeing appropriate growth in the city, we have to work together. To that end, we see a number of policies in the second draft of the official plan threatening to hinder or slow the development and growth of the city, both in the short and the long term. It is our understanding that council and staff would like to see development speed up in the Hewitt Secondary Plan area in order to recoup the extensive servicing costs the city has already spent. Some of these policies we feel would be counterintuitive to that direction. removing the Hewitt secondary plan and setting unachievable minimum density units per hectare targets that are substantially higher than those planned for the area would undoubtedly cause a slowdown and stunt growth in this area. Abandoning the collective work and many years of planning, plus the tax dollars spent undertaking a secondary plan and MASP process would be wasted. A requirement for new block plans for the lands not currently draft approved would be duplicative of the work previously completed and very recently completed by the city with the collaboration of the Hewitt landowners. It would be unnecessarily burdensome on the stakeholders, including city staff. Further, servicing requirements and transportation needs to accommodate these extra residents would all have to be reassessed. The existing infrastructure currently under construction would need to be resized, which is an unrealistic endeavor given the phase 1 lands are currently constructed. At the end of the day, a new secondary plan, whether it is named as such or not, would be needed. All of this just slowing progress down and wasting tax dollars. We want to build a great community here in Barrie and believe that the good work completed by staff in 2016 as part of the Hewitt secondary plan should be respected so that we can continue to move forward and see the area grow and connect to the greater Barrie area. I would like to say we have again enjoyed working with city staff and have in fact spoken with Michelle this afternoon and agreed to continue to talk to make sure that the policies in the official plan do not hinder the intent of the plan. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm happy to address any questions you may have. Otherwise, we'll pass it along to Matthew Corey, who will provide more specifics. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Santo, for being here on behalf of Dorsey and for giving us those comments. Yes, Mr. Corey is next. Mr. Corey, welcome to Planning Committee.
Good evening, Your Worship, and members of committee and to the public. Thank you for having us tonight and hearing us. I will endeavor to keep my comments fairly brief. I would say that Mr. Duhamel and Mr. McKinnon have stolen a bit of my thunder. They've said a lot of the things that I would say as well, and certainly Ms. Santo and I are aligned in terms of our thinking and thoughts. I would like to say, and again, echo what many of you have said, and repeat this at least, that I want to thank you and your staff. Your staff have been doing a tremendous amount of work. There is we submitted a lot of comments, and your staff have dealt with quite a lot of them and made some very constructive and excellent changes to make the official plan document a lot more usable and a lot more implementable. There are some significant ones that remain, but I think the tone that I would like to set, and certainly from my discussions with Tomas today and our ongoing discussions, is that there's a lot of room to find solutions, and solutions that I hope we can find mutually acceptable and move forward in community building together and with an expedited approval of the official plan, understanding the tight timelines everyone's on and that you're facing with the province. So in brief, some of the key comments we had: the overly prescriptive official plan policies. You've heard a bit about that tonight. I would say that as a planner, I find official plan language should be permissive and give guidance, but when you stray into anything that's overly site specific or area specific, that's when the language becomes challenging. That's maybe best left to a secondary plan or a zoning bylaw, and we would ask for some of that modification of the language and the tone in the official plan to be at that higher level with more guidance. Quite simply because if we get into individual circumstances where you're not assured at the beginning that the policy applies in every single instance, you necessitate official plan amendments to just do what everybody wants to have happen. And that's clearly not an implementable plan or the intent, I think, of what staff or you're trying to achieve. In terms of the Hewitt secondary plan, obviously, I share all the comments made today about maintaining it. However, in the case of Dorsey and looking at things, I think what's most important is that the intent of the Hewitt secondary plan be maintained. And in discussing things with staff, I believe there may be an opportunity to have an area or site-specific policy that enshrines the minimum density that's appropriate for our site in the context of the city's larger density targets that could be appropriate to move forward with something that makes sense. If the city staff and council ultimately decide not to reinstall the Hewitt secondary plan into the document, and there's also some site-specific policies that may give us the assurance that the planning has been done to a level of detail so that we would not be required to do a secondary or block plan as a future requirement of development. These are the kinds of solutions that we've been talking about with staff, and I'd like to bring to your attention because I think they may be ways forward in an expedited way without having to go back to the drawing board per se and relook at some of the bigger changes. The other major theme is the logical and flexible phasing policies. There was quite a number of phases in the first draft, especially when you get out to the outer edges of the community where we are on Dorsey's lands. And you know, I think the intent of phasing policy should be to expedite growth, but ensure that growth doesn't occur prior to the proper infrastructure and its time has come. But once that has occurred, it's in everyone's interest, obviously, including the cities, that growth occur in an expeditious manner so that the communities are built, the residents don't face undue exposure to construction periods, and quite honestly, development charge revenue flows in a way that makes sense and gives a return to the city on the infrastructure and capital investments. So one of the requests we have is that the phasing policies be made more flexible and ideally not require an official plan amendment to move from one phase to the next or to alter them, so long as council is satisfied that and staff are satisfied that the requirements are. There are a number of other policies that we have comments on, but we've submitted a written submission, and I gather from the staff they're more than willing to meet with us, which we're very thankful for, and we will take them up on that to go over those other detailed policies. But those are the big ones that we wanted to raise to your attention. And once again, thank you for this opportunity, and very much look forward to working with staff to getting this OP, getting it right, I think is the saying that you're using, the slogan, and we want to get it right, and we want to move forward and build a community with you together. Certainly our clients are dedicated to that, and very happy to work with you on this. And thank you again for the opportunity to provide comment.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Corey, for being here and for giving us comments on some of the broader issues, and we'll look forward to the written submission as well, of course. Our next registered speaker is Kathy Colbatch. Kathy, welcome to Planning Committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman and Planning Committee. Obviously, I think most of you will already know why I'm calling in, and that would be really to talk about the historic areas of the city and the residential neighborhoods, and how the city will improve, protect, and preserve these areas throughout the city. So when I look to the land use designation map, I do have concerns around the historic neighborhoods that are looking to be designated as medium density, that particularly back on or are abutting to the historic residential neighborhoods specifically. And so medium density, to my understanding, is up to 12 stories, which is really difficult when the house that would be behind anywhere, not just in Allendale, but in any part of Ward 2, all around the Bay, that we end up having potentially a 12-story building backing into a house that's a bungalow in behind. And then the second issue that I wanted to sort of raise is the accessory buildings for affordable housing, which was passed in November, and that's great. I mean, we've done, and I've had a quick look at the location for new affordable housing, and it was broken down by wards, which was really great. And you can see, and I've known this for a very long time, that Ward 2 and Ward 8, which are historic neighborhoods, have traditionally had second suites already and have had for many, many years. I think in Allendale, I could probably say 50% of our homes in and around Old Allendale, especially, are either rooming, boarding, housing, or second suites already, or rentals, some of which are registered and some of which are not. The concern that we're having is with accessory buildings now, and the size of the accessory buildings that are wanting to be built in behind some of these homes. And I'm not sure who, but I did send a couple of pictures that I wanted to show just to give you an idea quickly. So if they could put those up for me, I'd appreciate it. Is it Ryan? Thank you. And Ryan, you can actually skip to that, to back one, to the actual picture. That one. So just to give you an idea, this was an existing structure that was being converted from a storage garage into a accessory building with one unit. And the one unit here would be consisting of living, dining room, kitchen, and the upper level 2 bedrooms, built-in laundry, and a den. So really almost like a full-size house, if you will, in behind a bungalow. Ryan, can you go to the next? And that just shows the 2 levels. So it actually describes what's being built in that. Now this particular one is sitting in behind a bungalow. And so, you know, in terms of the actual number of bedrooms, it becomes a full-blown house, not an accessory suite, if you will. So there's some concern about that. And if you could go to the next one. And then this is also another one on Granville that's in behind a bungalow or 1.5-story house on Granville. And in this particular case, the lower level, this was passed, and the lower level is to be garage, with the upper level being a unit. And I believe, I'm not sure if we know if it has 1 bedroom or 2, I'm not sure. But the issue here is a minor variance. Now, you might think that a 3 meter is a minor variance, but residents don't feel that something that's an additional 10 feet in behind a bungalow is minor. Okay, Brian, can you move to the next picture? Thank you. And I think there was one more picture, that one. So here's this, and this is also being built in a historic neighborhood, which is, you know, it's lovely. It sort of fits into the neighborhood really. But what it is a semi-detached, and potentially there are 4 units in this front building. And then if you look in behind, and if you can move to the next picture, Ryan. This is the size of the unit, and there'll be 4 more units going in here. This is of great concern to the people in the historic neighborhoods, and not just in Allendale, but also in and around Ward 2. And we've seen recently comments in Simcoe.com, another family on Roselawn that was very surprised and upset, because can you imagine being the people on either side of this property, so the adjacent homeowners, and then the abutting people behind. So in fact, you're impacting potentially 4 and sometimes 5, because depending on the size of the lot, the back could be crossing 3 properties. So this is a concern throughout the city. And, you know, we've already got a large number of second suites, and now we're looking at opening up accessories. So I just wanted to raise this as an issue, and we'd like to have further discussion about that. And Brian, thank you. That's all I need for the pictures. So that, just to give you an idea. As far as the urban design guidelines and the comprehensive zoning bylaw updates are not included in this draft official plan. So really, we're just looking at the policies at this point, which are guidelines. And until we actually get a chance to sort of put it all together as a round, fulsome document, you know, I still would have comment, I think. So I would want to wait. And I agree with some of the other planners who've made comments about having potentially a second public meeting, because I think 30 days wasn't enough for a lot of people. And people are just actually starting to understand what this actually means. And I think that there will be more comments forthcoming. And I'm not sure that this is where this belongs, but I wanted to ask, because this is another issue that we're having. And I'm not sure if it's going to be adopted somewhere, or whether it's under sort of Planning Act as opposed to official plan. And that is with building, with new applications and with building, are there sunset clauses to how long it takes to build something, and can anything be done with that? Timelines and penalties for development that doesn't get built. Do we have penalties? So if a developer comes along, rezones land, starts building, or doesn't start building and just flips it, in the meantime, we've waited 4 years for something to be built. Is there penalties here? So I think that's all that I really had to say. It's a huge document. It's a lot to read, obviously, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Yes, there's some of those issues, obviously, that are about implementation of the plan and the subsidiary documents, the zoning bylaw and the design guidelines. But we appreciate those comments and your correspondence, and of course, we'll continue to make that part of the process. Thanks for coming here tonight. Thanks for being part of this. Next registered speaker we have tonight is Paul Thornton. Mr. Thornton, welcome to Planning Committee.
Oh, thank you. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm a resident of Barrie. I live in 17 Chalmers Drive in the South End, and I'm raising concerns about the Lovers Creek development off of Loon Avenue. A little background on myself. I'm a teacher, and for the last year, obviously, we know we've been doing a lot of virtual teaching, and my background is outdoor education for the Toronto District School Board. I've had the fortunate pleasure of taking virtual hikes in the Lovers Creek ravine with students from the Toronto District School Board. And it came to a surprise of me that a massive development was going to be going in and ruining the environment and the biodiversity of Lovers Creek. On my hikes, I have witnessed deer coming within 20 feet of me. In the winter times, I have seen, I don't mean to get graphic, but coyote kills. I have seen today, for instance, I saw snapping turtles, beaver lodge, beavers, and kids are witnessing this as I'm hiking with them. However, as I am exploring the forest, I have come to realize that a development was going to be put in there. And to believe it or not, I'm actually seeing a huge impact on what the folks are doing out there right now. They are, I'm from talking with, and I actually got a hold of a gentleman named Adam Holbolt. I think I'm saying his name right. And he was very excellent. He came out and actually talked to me along with his colleague, Jeremy. And he basically told me what was going on. And the impact is going to be devastating to that area. Not just to, the ecosystem, to the biodiversity, but also to, the people that actually bought their homes in that area, just for that beautiful background and scenery. And you know, it's a shame that a green space like that is going to turn into a concrete jungle, and it shouldn't. You know, and those, you know, and you guys, even in your video today, you showed people walking through paths. You showed people in green spaces, hiking, and enjoying what beautiful area Barrie is. And especially being right in the inner city of Barrie, a, a place like this is very valuable, not to, you know, us humans, but, you know, also to animals that thrive in that area. It's really gut wrenching to see what they're doing out there, and the impact it's going to have in our neighborhood, on the infrastructure that the roads can't handle. And we've talked a lot about that infrastructure today, and the homes going in there. It's really a shame. And then when I tell the kids where I am, they're going, "Where is this place?" And you know, like, this is a beautiful spot. And I say, "Yeah, it's a hidden gem." And then I tell them the story, what's going to take place, and they're devastated. And we teach our kids about human impact and how the human impact is going to, you know, devastate environments. And you know, and this is one that is very it should be thought about and looked at a bit differently. And I'm willing, and I've sent many emails to the mayor, to you, mayor, to councilors, and I'm willing to take you on hikes to see the ecosystem in there, and to see what nature, what beauty we have within our, you know, our beautiful city of Barrie. And along with that, you know, the people that are doing the work out there. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So tonight's public meeting is about our new official plan, which is the plan that will come into effect some time from now for the future. It actually doesn't have any impact on the development that you're talking about, unless there was something in this plan that was sort of retroactive to the application that you're talking about. And I was told allowing you to continue to make your comments.
No, it's okay if it's the wrong stuff I'm talking about, but I was told to sign up and, you know, talk about what impact would be happening on the Loon Avenue development. So anyways.
Well, what I want to do is make sure that your process for when that's on the table, when that is being discussed, and the issues related to that development application. So what I'd like to ask you to do is after you're done tonight, can you email whichever of the staff that helped you sign up for this, and make sure you're on the list for when that Loon development application comes back to planning committee, because that's when we would be making a decision. And it's not to discount in any way your very heartfelt comments and your experience, but because what we're talking about tonight isn't going to affect that, and vice versa, I want to make sure you're part of the right process.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I guess I got the miscommunication somewhere along the line, but thank you.
Well, there are important points, though, for this as well, which is the new official plan and the importance of green spaces as we do look forward to planning new areas of the city. So relevant, and that's why I wanted to let you continue to make some of those comments. But just because that isn't on the agenda tonight, we'll get you connected to that right process too. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Thornton.
Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah. Okay, who I believe is Greg Stevenson. Mr. Stevenson, welcome to Planning Committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and good evening, everybody. Pleasure to be here to talk about this important plan. So yeah, my name is Greg Stevenson, and I live at 5 Tomlin Court in South Barrie. A bit about me. So I work as a marketer in the pharmaceutical firm in Toronto, and I've been a resident in Barrie for over 25 years and been commuting my entire career, choosing what I refer to as the benefits of Barrie, I guess, over urbanized Toronto. And I don't mean urbanized in a negative sense, just what I mean is for me and my family, we've kind of enjoyed the affordability of a more comfortable living space versus Toronto. For example, a nice yard with some privacy. Doesn't have to be huge, but some privacy, less congestion in the streets, great schools. Public sports facilities have been great for my kids as well. Access to green space, everything we've talked about tonight. And the proximity to skiing and hiking, it's just amazing. Waterfront is amazing as well, with access to swimming and boating. So I don't have to convince everybody how great Barrie is, but I did want to make the point, all of this contributes to an impressive quality of life. And when I think about the best of Barrie and I think about these official plans, I have this in mind. And my thinking is about how to ensure that stays in Barrie as we ensure a strong, vibrant city and develop for 30 years on. So I've given written comments already. So tonight, I'm not necessarily going to go into details. I'm more going to be maybe a bit aspirational with the intent of this point of how can we keep what we love about Barrie, or at least I do, and many of people I speak to like about Barrie. There were 3 topic areas I thought, and not sure what can change, but I'm going to put it out there, and maybe we can have follow-up. But the first is, do we have to follow these quote unquote 2051 numbers? So I'm concerned about the rapid growth we've seen the past couple decades. It already is putting the stress on the city infrastructure, parking, roads, and schools, and everyone's acknowledging that. We're trying to deal with that. But where is this number coming from? Is this something that is imposed, or does the city have a choice? And if they have a choice, why? How does the strategic fit for the doubling population? I want to give an example. I read in the Barrie Today article, and I'm sure you've all heard about it, about an approved plan in Barrie on Rosalind Road for an additional house built on a single lot within a mature residential neighborhood. So this is now a lot that's had a single house for many years, and now there's a second property being built on that single lot, and it's approved. Here's a quote from the resident. It may be legitimate with the city of Barrie and with the province, but every single one of my neighbors, and I'm talking everyone, is completely just so upset. One neighbor back on Rose Street is so upset that he actually put a for sale sign on his house the very next day. And when he found out about this, and he sold. So I'm sure this is not what we want. I know we respect and trust that the residents of Barrie are here for a reason, and very different reasons. Not everyone is like me, I acknowledge that. But I hope this gives an example that there can be these situations that that's driving this need for intensification. And, you know, I think my colleague resident, Mr. Thornton, and I agree with you, Mayor Lehman, maybe it's not specific today, but it's the concept of decisions that are being made even on green space to drive this need to double the population. So for example, from a strategy standpoint, could we set a lower target and challenge the province and put the demand on other cities, neighboring cities, perhaps not as well developed? Could there be a rationale there? So I'll stop with that point. And I'll move on to the second, which is around jobs. So I really am encouraged by the target for jobs in addition to the population growth. But how will we get those 150,000 jobs, and what type of jobs will they be? And do they acknowledge in the city they're globally competitive, high-paying jobs? I love the vision, and you know, I think it's great. But and I'm sure this might be in other plans. Maybe it's not for within this plan, but I do think for the confidence and to show that the plan is robust, there needs to be more in there about how we will track jobs. What are the targets that are being set, short and medium term? So 150 after 30 years. So how is that going to grow? And how do we measure that? And so that we learn to adjust, because it's a very, as we all know, economically attracting the right jobs is not a simple thing. And it's something that deserves a lot of thought and planning and critical evaluation. And perhaps residents could contribute to that as well in some way. So that was my second topic. Third, my favorite topic, Mayor Harris might be familiar with this one, but spillover parking. So I apologize to bring it up yet again, but it is a passion for the reasons I explained, the best of Barrie. These streets being, having our kids play hockey in the street, just playing catch, just the whole quality of life feel when you're walking down a street, safety issues, all of that matters. And in the plan, the one specific section of the plan I will comment tonight, on page 100, there's an acknowledgement of this, but not really a lot to it. The city may update, I quote, the city may update parking strategy to review spillover parking areas and provide further directions for on-street parking. I think we need to go farther. I think we need to acknowledge there's a problem with spillover parking. We see this all over South Barrie and in residential streets and church parking lots. There's complaints there. And the notion of reduced dependency on cars, to be clear, this is not documented. It's a wish, it's not a fact. There is no evidence to show that. And business in Barrie sales for cars is thriving. 85% of people rely on a car every day to work. They have to personally drive. So yes, we need to reduce dependency on cars, but just like jobs, it's not going to happen on its own. And there should be targets and there should be measures in place. And until that reduced dependency happens, I think we need a policy very clearly putting the parking supply on the residential, especially high intense new residential developments. Adequate parking supply for what we would know will be the demand of those new residents who are struggling. They're paying a lot for these places. And I don't think it's right to impose them a new financial burden of now figuring out where to park the cars. And if the plan is to park them on the street long-term, I don't think that's something everyone will agree with. And I don't even know if the city agrees with that. Is parking on the street, overnight parking, a parking solution for new intensification that's happening? So I believe we need a policy. We need to be clear, transparent, acknowledge that, yes, we want to reduce dependency on cars, but also acknowledge in Barrie, there's no evidence to show that yet. And again, just like jobs, set targets, put in real hard measures and hold accountable to those measures. And until it does reduce, help our residents have parking, because it's a stress if you have a car and you have nowhere to put it. And I've heard stories where it's the last thing people think of when they buy a property. We know how competitive properties to buy now are. There's not a lot of possibility to choose on the basis of parking. We'll figure it out type mentality is happening. And then that's going to affect, of course, the streets and parking and congestion. So I'll stop there. Thank you for hearing me out, and I appreciate the process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. We'll look for your written remarks as well, and thanks for your love for your community and for giving us your comments on those issues. Our next registered speaker, I believe, is Mr. Darren Vella. Mr. Vella, welcome to Planning Committee.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. It's been a long evening. I'm sure a lot to take in for not only council but staff as well as the people listening. I always find it fascinating just listening to comments from all different places relative to the different needs of the city. I think the consensus here is that there still is work that needs to be done to finalize this official plan. As some of my colleagues have pointed out to you, there is a tremendous onus placed on City Council to make sure that this official plan is done properly. We really don't want to put ourselves in a situation where the official plan is approved and it actually encumbers development, because that would go against the fundamental principles of this document. So we shouldn't rush this document. I'm completely in favor of a second public meeting. Ms. Banfield and Thomas, Mr. Wiersba, they've been doing a tremendous job, Your Worship, on communicating to the public, having meetings with people like myself, planning consultants, stakeholders. They've really been dedicating a lot of time over and above, dealing with applications, a high volume of applications running through the city. So just a few real specific things that I would like to speak to. The first is for those applications, and this council has actually approved some applications to amend the current official plan. Those are not cheap applications to go through. They take a lot of time. Some of them are very controversial. And those approvals most definitely should be carried forward into the new official plan. As an example, the property at 76 Edgehill Drive is currently approved for a 12-story building at a density of 255 units per hectare. The new official plan would place that property into the medium density designation, which would only permit a maximum density of 125 units per hectare. So that would effectively cut the development permissions in half for that property, which I would suggest is not fair to the process that application went through and to accomplish the goals of intensification on that particular site. So looking at the density categories, there are three main residential density categories in this plan. So you have your neighborhood area, you've got your medium density designation, and you've got your high density designation. The medium density designation caps development to a maximum of 125 units per hectare, whereas your high density designation sets a minimum standard of 300 units per hectare. So development applications coming forward to council between 126 and 299 units per hectare really don't have a place in the current official plan. There is only one reference to the ability for that scale of development in the city, and that is currently in the areas identified on map 2, identified as being community hubs, which are in the blue color on the mapping. And what I would suggest to council, and I think staff are aware of this now, is those areas are located in very stable parts of the city. They recognize existing community facilities, churches, recreation centers, libraries, other private parcels. And I don't think we would want to see a very dense development pop up in the middle of a very stable neighborhood because of the current density provisions in the OP. So we do know that there are many active intensification projects, and that based on my experience, particularly the ones that I've worked on, for those parcels that are in a medium density or a mid-rise built form, they are generally coming into the city and being approved in excess of 125 units per hectare. So two examples of those would be 390 Essa Road, which is a 6-story apartment building that has got 74 units in it, containing as well some affordable housing units. That was approved by City Council at over 220 units per hectare, which would be a medium density product, as well as 480 Essa Road, which is very close by to 390, just on the opposite side of Veterans Drive, on the south side of Veterans Drive in Essa Road, which is an 8-story apartment building. And that one is approved, I believe, at 280 units per hectare. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that we definitely want the density categories to reflect the built form that is going to be built in certain parts of the city. The other thing that I would just like to comment on relating to these intensification areas, given that we are involved in a high number of intensification projects, and we know that those are most definitely, at least in my experience, the most controversial applications that engage a lot of citizen input. I think it would be very important, particularly along the Essa Road and the Yonge Street corridors, to not designate any of those lands in the neighborhood area category. That designation in the OP, when you read it in the first few paragraphs, does allude to the fact that those areas are the most stable areas throughout the entire city, and that they are not going to see a substantial amount of change. And I think it would benefit both a developer and a consultant like myself, but also the public and members of council, that there's very clear direction in the official plan as to where the anticipated growth will take place, to ensure that there is very clear policies for when we get into these scenarios where there is a lot of public involvement surrounding a project. So I believe that the city did do a great job looking at the intensification corridor that's highlighted along Bayfield Street. So the majority of that stretch has been placed into a medium density category, albeit all of those lands that are medium density are currently occupied by commercial uses, which would no longer be permitted in the current official plan. So there definitely needs to be some thought to how do we promote mixed use development along Bayfield Street, but also allow, for example, the development of a new Starbucks to be integrated into that corridor at the same time. So there is a bit of work to do there. The affordable housing section of the OP, I don't think you're going to get anyone arguing the fact that there is definitely a need for affordable housing in the city. It is definitely an important thing when we're looking at creating an official plan and the amount of population that we are planning for. I think the difficulty in implementing the affordable housing strategy that's currently in place is we are looking to place a higher percentage of affordable housing units into the more densely populated areas because of the availability of services, which makes complete sense. But they're also being placed into the areas where the cost of construction is the highest in the city. So the type of construction occurring in the urban growth center in particular is typically a high-rise building, very, very expensive construction cost. And how does that developer make 20% of that building work from an affordable housing perspective? I'm not sure how those economics are going to come into play. I think that the individual and the developer that's building single detached homes in the secondary plan areas should definitely not be left off the hook. They should also be contributing to affordable housing, and not that the secondary plan areas may be the appropriate place for affordable housing, but there should be some level of contribution for every development coming forward in the city to build this affordable housing in the right places to service that part of our society. So finally, the last comment, Your Worship, just relates to, and I think this has been talked about previously, the urban design policies in the official plan. So there is reference that the way the current document is drafted, there is a mandatory requirement to comply with the urban design guidelines through future development applications. Be very difficult for, I think, any consultant to accept the approval of the current policy framework without having the opportunity to review those guidelines in advance of a decision being rendered on the new official plan. So I would hope that Michelle's team is going to be releasing the urban design guidelines in advance of this being brought forward back to council for ultimately a final decision. So thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Always a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak in front of you, and we'll look forward to speaking with you more on this subject.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vella. Lots in that and some themes we're hearing tonight. So thank you very much for being here and giving us your comments. We will bring in our next speaker, which is Mr. Al McNair, also no stranger to Planning Committee. Mr. McNair, the floor is yours. We can't hear you yet, though, Al. If you're on mute on your end, that might be the issue.
Can you hear me, sir?
There we go. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have submitted comments on the first draft. I did speak with planning staff for a bit this morning, and I've sort of sent another letter in because a lot of the issues that I had raised, it was kind of hard to find out whether anything had been, whether there had been any response to them, but I had a good conversation with Mr. Wiersbe this morning. So there's a number of topics I'd like to speak to. First off is street designations and intensification. And I understand that the street designations that are in the official plan, that's arterial, collector, or local streets, are based on the 2010 Master Transportation Plan. Now that document is acknowledged by staff to be out of date now. They expect that it's going to be updated between 2022 and 2025. But the official plan is going forward now and has policies that, intensification policies that relate to properties that may be on arterial or collector streets rather than local ones. And so I had asked that the city in my earlier submission consider reviewing these classifications as to how they actually serve their local neighborhoods rather than just how much vehicle traffic they can or do carry. So in the interim, because there's this 4 or 5 year waiting period, I am asking that intensification should only be directed to those major streets which will be designated as intensification corridors. Because at this point, if we do rethink our road classification, and I feel there are some good reasons for looking at that, then we could be approving projects that then no longer have any relevance to the policies, but hey, sorry folks, too late. I think we need to remember that we're planning for a city that works for people and their neighborhoods at a human scale, and that includes natural heritage areas, not just the roads. There are definitions included in the first draft of the official plan for low, mid, and high-rise buildings, and I'm not sure whether that terminology on building forms is actually going to be in the second draft or third draft official plan policies. But I think if it's going to be used, it should be in the definition section, because I had to hunt it out in another part of the document in the first draft. And I think it's pretty important for people to know what it is that the city's talking about when they talk about those kind of building forms, because it's like 1 to 6 stories, 7 to 12 stories, and 12 stories, and go where you want. I would also suggest that mid-rise and high-rise buildings should not be permitted in the designated neighborhood areas. I think it's pretty damn difficult to find a measure of compatibility between those. The historic neighborhood areas, some very good ideas about that. However, I would suggest that they should not allow development greater than 3 stories in order to maintain compatibility with the abutting existing dwellings and their surrounding neighborhoods. Now, Barrie's East End, where I live, shows many examples of historically compatible intensification that does not exceed 3 stories in height. So I think everything doesn't have to be new. Sometimes some of the stuff that we did 50, 60 years ago still keeps working out pretty well. Also, I don't think there should be a required minimum density for redevelopment in historic neighborhood areas, because I think that will only encourage grossly out of scale proposals for redevelopment. And we do get a surprising number of those kind of proposals come forward already. The historic East End neighborhood, which I live in, the boundary of it is very strange, the north boundary. And my suggestion is that it should be extended possibly as far as the strategic growth area on Bell Farm Road and around Georgian College and the hospital. And I had submitted a suggested boundary of that map. When you get way over in the very northeast corner over towards Penetanguishene Road, that's much more recent development there. But if you drive through that neighborhood, you don't find a lot of variation in what the area looks like on the ground, going from Napier Street to Steele Street to Grove Street, and going, working your way east from Duckworth. So that's another suggestion. If there's going to be redevelopment of existing institutional and commercial sites in neighborhood areas, I think that should require an official plan amendment. I think that any residential expansion on an existing lot where you're going to increase the footprint of buildings by more than 20% from what's there, or where there are landscaping provisions or protection of natural heritage features or functions should be subject to site plan control. I think there are some key issues with the city's natural heritage mapping and the overlays, particularly looking at maps 2 and 3. But we've got a lot of very good environmental information on the Salem and Hewitt's secondary plan areas in the south end. If you look at those maps, excuse me, you'll see that there's an awful lot more detail in those newly annexed 5,000 acres than there is in the rest of the city. And so I'm suggesting that the mapping needs to be thoroughly re-examined to ensure that, for example, the small but important parcels of natural heritage lands in the older city are protected to the maximum. The recently annexed lands have, as I said, better protection, but the natural heritage system in the older city is extremely fragmented, and we need every bit we can get. For example, in the Vine Crescent area, just south off Shirley Street between Ann Street and Sunnydale Road, there are ravine areas in there that should be designated as natural heritage system, not neighborhood area or even medium density. They are in the natural heritage evaluation that's been done so far. Those are a small chunk of, it's the best stuff we've got. It's natural heritage 1, and yet so my question is, why is it not designated that way? We have that designation in our official plan. And also, I was curious, in that same area, there's I just noticed in reviewing the planning mapping again today, there's a little stub of intensification corridor on Ann Street from Edge Hill to the 400. Now, that's an already kind of dodgy traffic area at Edge Hill and Ann Street, because it's at the bottom of the hill coming down off the 400 overpass, and it's at the bottom of a much larger hill on Ann Street. There's a stoplight there. There's a fair amount of traffic from apartment buildings and things in the area, as well as traffic coming in the back way to the Cedar Point commercial area. And I'm just a bit at a loss to understand why that's a great place for adding additional development and additional traffic, which is the idea of an intensification corridor. And my last comment, and I included this in my comments on the first draft, but I think it's still something that we should be front and center in the city's minds and council's minds, is about the nature of work and residential areas. In the face of our present existential challenges of both climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic, the nature of our urban residential areas may need to be rethought. There will be much more likelihood of residents working from home and telecommuting in the longer term. Yeah, we used to keep saying, yeah, nobody's going to do that. And now all of a sudden, everybody's been doing that, right? This could be hugely beneficial for our individual health as an alternative to long hours spent physically inactive, sitting in traffic behind the wheel of a car. It will allow more time each day for our personal lives and for community involvement. It also has the potential to substantially reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by reducing commuting, which was illustrated during the first wave pandemic. Anybody here remember the first wave? Seems so long ago, in the spring and summer of 2020. The long-term success of such life work changes will also require many of us to create room in our homes for pleasant, functional work and learning spaces for all family members. This will likely increase the demand for our present housing stock at its existing scale, rather than trying to work on laptops on the kitchen table of a small condo or rental apartment. It will likely cause us to rethink the concepts of constant growth and reacquaint ourselves with the idea of work-life balance. And I think that's all the more reason why we need to ensure protection of our residential neighborhoods. I look forward to an opportunity to have further discussions with staff about this, and I thank the council members for your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNair, especially for the big picture thinking at the end there. It could also pretty dramatically change commuting patterns, reduce and change transportation patterns. So thank you very much for coming with all those comments tonight. Our next registered speaker tonight is Karen Buck, and she is the last of those who registered before the meeting. We do have a number who have registered during the meeting, so members of committee, stay put, and we will continue after Ms. Buck with those who have registered during the meeting. Ms. Buck, welcome to Planning Committee. Oh, you're still on mute, Ms. Buck. I don't know if that's your end or ours. There we go.
Oh, am I okay now?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay, good evening. Until the last speaker, I thought that I was not of this world in Barrie, because I do think that we are in extremely extraordinary times, and that has to do with climate change and also COVID and the possibility that we have a future that has other pandemics that we have to deal with. And so I think that what I got really sort of into was the fact that you've got a draft community emissions chart, and Barrie is responsible for 1 million tons of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. And I think that because of these these extraordinary times, that this plan should be looking at the draft community emissions and putting the two together so that we understand where we really are going. I mean, McNair said that, this is an existential problem, and I think it needs solving for future generations, and that we are the ones who are making those decisions. So number one, you should be trying to get building height right for the climate. And I'm talking in terms of emissions and energy, the way that we may have to go in order to solve some of these problems. So there was a study by 2 UK architectural firms, and they just said that the high rise is out. It just uses way too much energy. And I was studying, 9 different building types. They decided that the 4-story courtyard actually had the lowest overall emissions after 40 years. We don't know when we have to cut emissions and how many we have to cut. And over that period that this planning goes to 2051. We may have to do a lot more than we think that we have to do, and it may be very, very difficult. So I'm saying that all new buildings should have to be net zero buildings, and I hope that you can come to an agreement with the province on that one, especially with their building codes. And roofs, they could be the solution to an awful lot of problems that we may be starting to encounter or are even encountering now. For renewable solar electricity, and also to optimize net metering contracts. And also those roofs may be required for green roofs or different other applications that we may need. Like, I enjoy living in my neighborhood in Barrie now, and the reason that I really enjoy it is because of past initiatives of past councils that have given the neighborhood good access to park areas, natural areas, and I do know of 2 that are preserved so that they ensure that the natural environment is a living, functioning part of the city. And I think that that is extremely important. The upcoming official plan should be strong on land conservation and protection of natural functioning areas of the environment. I was actually shocked when I saw the video that was presented at the beginning of how much concrete there actually was in that video at the beginning. And I kept on looking for the green areas, and finally they arrived. But I do think we need to really look in terms of the livability of where we're going. And there could be the management of runoff could be a problem if there's that much concrete. And maybe we need to even think about our infrastructure of the sewage system. Do we need to have everybody with mandatory downspout disconnects and rain gardens? And then I'm very supportive because I think there has been a breakdown of socioeconomic stratifications in our current population, and I think that we've come up against, personal problems, and these need solving. We really need, and I really, give you credit and staff credit for the fact that you are setting aside and you've zoned for affordable housing, because I don't think that we can afford to leave people behind. And I think that if we're a community and a caring community, we need to have new housing types that do give that affordable housing. There's a new town, a lot of people are moving into tiny houses because of the affordability of them. Are we looking at where those could be in Barrie? And what other affordable housing options are there? We need to have net zero housing, of course. And maybe there's a link that we can make with Habitat for Humanity and some other ideas about where we are going to have that affordable housing and how wonderful it is. I did read one idea just recently out of an architectural magazine, and that was, they were saying that affordable housing should be a mix. Like, you could be creating the opportunity to have price adjusted so that units for sale or rent within a unit means that you're going to have a mixed group of people living together as a neighborhood. And I think that that is really important in our society. Now, I'm very supportive of complete streets, but quite frankly, I don't know how you're going to get there if you don't start thinking about it now. We want active transportation, and if we're sitting in our houses and we're not using our cars, we're going to want active transportation within the whole city of Barrie, for maybe reasons of recreation or just kids getting to school, and places where they have really good networks of active transportation. Have one of the ones that I know about is Oulu, Finland. All their kids cycle to school. They don't get rides to school, they cycle to school. And there are 2 separate networks. One is for active transportation. You don't run into cars, you're totally separated, it's totally safe. And the other one is for cars for those needs that where you do have to use an automobile or some kind of transportation for delivering things to homes. Anyway, I just wanted this particular OP to be put into the context of climate change and how we're going to reduce our emissions in Barrie and be a part of the overall contribution of getting to 2030 with 60% of Canada's fair share being accomplished, and how we're going to get to net zero in 2050. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Buck. Thank you for covering such broad ground and many high-level issues that need to be reflected in an official plan. So thank you very much for all those comments. Next,
You're welcome.
thanks again. Next, I'll call Arnie Ibsens into the call. Mr. Ibsens, nice to hear from you again, and welcome to Planning Committee.
Hi there, thank you very much. I see the hour's getting late, so I'm not going to be too long here. It's always kind of good to have Kathy Colbatch in the crowd because she covered a lot of the things that were sort of my issues and some of my concerns. So, and Councillor Jim Harris is certainly aware of these as well, what's going on in our neighborhoods. So just a bit of background though, maybe Deputy Mayor Ward was still on council then, but I used to be on Heritage Barrie many years ago. And I was actually, when I was on that committee, we were the ones that drafted and implemented the historic neighborhood strategy plan. So, so that sort of concept is pretty dear to me and important to me. And it's been, this November 1st will be 35 years that Lynn and I bought our house here in Allendale on Alfred Street, and we still live here. So we love the area and all that comes with it. And sort of Kathy shared actually some pictures that I had taken about, and Mr. Councillor Harris knows about this, is a fourplex behind a fourplex. And so things like this, it's important to maintain our neighborhoods. And Mr. McNair also kind of addressed this in his comments about things fitting in where they should be. And sort of developers, and I understand, and my wife's probably, I think she's kicking me under the table right now because we're zoned RM1. And so the zoning allows for certain things like this to happen. And so how do we change those things? I mean, I imagine it has to come from council at some point because we have a fairly deep lot. It's an old neighborhood. And with the current zoning, yeah, they could probably put, you know, a large fourplex on our property as well. But, you know, we like our yard, we like our neighborhood, and that's why we bought here 35 years ago. So, but there's been a bit of an influx around Marcus Street and on Alfred Street. I feel for the people who live on Wood Street that have to look at these huge, massive houses that are being built in this area. And the developer even used like a duplex across the street as an example. And it's, well, the duplex across the street is basically a bungalow with a basement, and it's split in two. So when you're kind of using that as leverage, I guess, to say to develop your plans, it doesn't really fit with what's going on. And while I have your attention here too, I mean, he also lied to the Committee of Adjustment, saying it was going to be a bungalow behind this fourplex, and because of zoning that allows it to happen, once he got all his variances and severed one lot into three, he put up 2 fourplexes because the zoning allowed it to happen. So these things kind of need to happen, I think, with the official plan where we protect our neighborhoods and especially our older ones. Barrie sometimes seems to be a bit of a city of a sprawl. I'm totally opposed to the 40-story building down at the waterfront. And I've said to anybody to listen, if you want to put up 40-story apartment buildings, put them up near the South GO station, put them up in Hawley, put them where the people sort of travel more as opposed to our downtown. I'm totally for revitalizing our downtown. I don't think big story buildings like this are the answer for that. But you sort of see beside the GO station, the South GO station, now you drive by there and they're all townhouses. You drive along by Prince William Way there, Mapleview, where the new high school is going to be. It's all sort of sprawled out. And so I think those are sort of areas that you can do intensification and density and still leave the core of Barrie the way it was meant to be, in my opinion, anyways. And I think that's most of it. I know there's other people waiting, and you folks have been here for a few hours, so I'll just leave it at that. And thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Arnie. Thanks for coming tonight to give us those comments. Our next speaker is Dr. Mark Blair. Mr. Blair, Dr. Blair. Welcome to
Hello.
Planning Committee. And
Good evening, everyone.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Mayor Lehman, council members, and Planning Committee. My name is Dr. Mark Blair. I own the property at 265 St. Vincent Street East. That's on the corner, southeast corner of St. Vincent and Grove. When I was looking at the draft maps, I noticed that my property is still designated as a neighborhood area in the yellow. And so tonight I wanted to verbally submit a request for consideration to change to the medium density or orange designation. And some of the factors that might support this change are that it's a relatively large land parcel at the intersection of a 4-lane arterial road, not being St. Vincent Street, and the collector road of Grove Street, with frontages on both roads. It's strategically located close distance to Georgian College and RVH, and it's about 2 kilometers from the downtown Barrie. It has quick and easy highway access and bus routes servicing the property. The intersection it's located on already has the Shell gas station at one corner, 4-story apartment building, kitty corner to my property, and then with 3 or 4 story apartment buildings within a block, just heading west on Grove Street from the intersection, representing a transitioning area for density appropriate growth. Having a medium density designation that would allow for 6+ stories instead of a limited of 4 stories would facilitate the city's goal of increasing the density-based housing supply quicker and sooner, as an increase in my density designation would facilitate me in attracting interest in developing my property. And due to its location and lack of housing in Barrie, as it sits now, it's no longer at its highest and best use for this site. So I just wanted to submit that verbally to you. And I'd like to thank you for your consideration with this location. I've also submitted a written request for the same. So I'd like to thank you for that and have a good evening.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Blair, for your comments. Madam Clerk, I don't know if we've had anyone else registered during the meeting. I know there were a couple that decided not to speak. I will just ask now for those on the call, those watching, if you do wish to speak about the new draft official plan, please call 705-797-5353 or email cityclerks@barrie.ca and staff will get you the information to come into the call. Ms. Cook, have we had additional people register to speak?
Yes, Mayor Lehman. Miss Ashley Polnishuk, sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong, has indicated she wishes to speak again.
Okay, Ms. Polnishuk, come on into the call. We'll get her into the call.
Hi.
Welcome to Planning Committee. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just obviously, I mean, for those of you who know, obviously the changes to the affordable housing requirement in residential is, I think it's great. I think you guys have done a great job. And I think that that's something that we really need to address. Where I've been struggling is the non-industrial employment land designations. I've reviewed this a couple of times. I know it has changed from the first draft to the second, but And again, trying to keep the difference between zoning and official plan. I know they are different, but my mind automatically goes from one to the other. I'm struggling with how it's drafted in relation to pretty much everything that's now done as industrial, non-employment industrial, allows for almost every use except for waste management, essentially. And we're already struggling in the commercial real estate field to fill industrial needs that are coming up the highway, especially with the way the light industrial has been kind of taken over and been turned into more of a retail office component for that use. Now, I do think that the non-employment industrial, again, like I said, I'm struggling with it. I feel like it's not, you're essentially just applying a light industrial zoning to every corridor, every area that's there now. And it's really restricting our use to bring in things like truck terminals and warehousing distribution, especially moving into a new world where we're going to be almost e-commerce. So I know I have spoken to Michelle about this, but the one thing that sticks out, I kind of laugh at, this is supposed to be a supportive, but the city has identified adult entertainment as being a key component in the non-industrial employment, where, I'm feeling the demand for that might be a little bit less than things like distribution and warehousing and that type of thing. So again, I think that, again, keeping zoning and official plan differently, the light industrial application that non-employment seems to have really compromises our ability to have more industrial and jobs. I will tell you right now, there is hundreds of thousands of square feet that we cannot place right now. And I know that this will help, but I think having that light industrial zone more or less overrule the entire industrial aspect is going to become a problem, because if you have empty office buildings like we do that are charging $30 a square foot, but your industrial allows for offices to be $8 a square foot, where are people going to go? And what are landlords going to take? They're going to go to the thing that does not pollute, that does not cause any issues, that's going to keep their land clean, and we're going to end up having no industrial space, and it's going to be full of offices, which is great, but it doesn't bring the same jobs, and it doesn't allow us to fill our needs for our clients. So that's one thing that, again, I'm struggling with both this one and the last one, but that was based on, I think, the light industrial. And Jeff and I have talked about it before. The light industrial zone has caused a lot of problems. So that's pretty much the only comments I have on that. And I just think there needs to be a little bit more work on that to ensure that we don't end up with a retail office industrial area and no space for industrial.
Okay, thank you very much for the comments, especially regarding those employment designations, given the market. We are seeing strength of demand now to bring those kinds of uses to Barrie. So thank you for being here. Madam Clerk, I don't believe we have any more speakers.
No, Mayor Lehman, we don't.
Okay, so thank you to all the members of the public, more than 20, who've given us their comments tonight over the last couple of hours. Members of the Planning Committee, I want to take your temperature on this, but we are now in hour 14 of meeting. We had an 8-hour meeting Monday night that went till 1 a.m. So what I'm going to suggest is, first of all, I am going to enforce the 3-sentence rule on questions. You must ask your question in 3 sentences or less. And the other thing I would like to suggest is maximum of 2 questions per member of Planning Committee. This is the public meeting, it's for the public, and these are only supposed to be questions of clarification. So if you do have something that you feel needs to be clarified by staff at this point in the meeting, I do want to allow those questions, but I'm just going to urge you given all of you were up until 1 or 2 a.m. a night before last, 3-sentence rule is in effect, and maximum of 2 questions each, and I will start with the Deputy Mayor. Do you have any questions of clarification for staff?
No, I've actually got a meeting with staff. I think a lot of members of council do next week, and so I'll get momented then.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Are there any questions of clarification from other members of Planning Committee? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will definitely keep it quick, and I will follow up with much more with staff. But I just want to clarify, just because I know it's a concern with many residents in my ward. I see the northeast corner of Mapleview and Essa Road on the second draft is designated as high density. And I'm just curious as to the rationale for that, because I do understand it's one of the gateways. But then when I look around on this map, it's not until you hit the city center area that you see other high density areas. And I know one of the deputants even mentioned about across the street from the GO station, which I do agree would be a lot more suitable for high density than what ESSA and Mapleview would be.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, we are definitely looking at all of the designations. This proposal, or this draft at this point for that site is a combination of us working with the current application that's before us. So we are trying to capture something that is going to get us the built form that we want there, and that bit of that density, recognizing the site is also going to be bisected by the creek. But we will absolutely take a look at that and respond to in our meeting, and certainly in the final staff report and comment matrix.
Great. And my next one, again, another hot topic in my area seems to be these back-to-back towns, and back-to-back towns that are much higher than 2 stories. However, I don't see any mention of back-to-back towns in this second draft. And the only thing that reaches above, for instance, we do have the one application that came forward with that were 4.5-story back-to-backs. And the only thing that comes close to that I can see would be stack towns. So how does back-to-backs play into this? And also too, even when it comes to like the length of rows of back-to-backs, because I know straight towns, it's rows of 8 within our bylaws.
Through your Mayor Lehman to Councillor Harvey. So at this point, the height is dictated, and so we're not necessarily dictating the type of built form. So it will probably be a combination of streets and stacked townhouses and back-to-backs, but it's the height limit and the density that's intended to work together to have a built form that works for the particular site. So in the neighborhood area, it would be a maximum height of 3 stories on a local road. And then, as I said, the height does go up a little bit higher to 4 stories if it's a collector or arterial, and then on an intensification corridor, it goes up a tiny bit higher. But the idea is to have the built form and the density and the height all work together on the particular site. As far as the blocks, the length, that's in the zoning bylaw, Councillor Harvey. So we'll look at that when we bring the new zoning bylaw forward.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just one suggestion, just because I'll be quite honest with you, it took quite a bit of digging and diving through a lot of wording, whereas something in chart form might be a lot easier for all of us in the council, and I think too it would help residents understand what's potentially coming down the pipes too.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Harvey. Not just chart form, but even some of the images to show what these different built forms. You know, we're familiar with the term stacked townhouses and back-to-backs, but a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar. So there was a slide, Ms. Banfield, you used earlier that shows some of that, but translating the numbers to what the built form looks like, that's the really important piece. And I quite agree with Councillor Harvey. Councillor Kungl, questions of clarification?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Banfield. Could you share the role or focus of the Committee of Adjustment? So when the OP comes forward and we have those guiding policies and that vision, does it also, just for those watching tonight, what's the relationship to then Committee of Adjustment? And does that reset those parameters or the mandate by which things can come forward and potentially be approved for changes?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungl. So the Committee of Adjustment has effectively 2 application processes. One's the minor variance and one is the consent. The OP does set a framework for both of those types of applications. A minor variance has to conform to the official plan. That is one of the tests of a minor variance. So something that is coming forward that does not
conform to the official plan would not be considered minor. It would not meet the tests, and that wouldn't be an appropriate approval process. And the same thing with a consent application. There are consent policies in the official plan, and those policies to create a new lot, which is what the consent does, would have to comply to that. So, so the official plan is important for both of the processes that Committee of Adjustment considers.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Riepma.
We heard quite a bit about density tonight. And I guess my question is, to reach a population that we're targeting, do all of the designations have to be built out to the minimum density that you're suggesting in order for us to reach that population? Or is there some sort of a vacancy factor in that, or do we know?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Riepma, and that's a great question, because I kind of say that there's growth plan math, if you will, that looks at the quantum of land and the quantum of people and the quantum of jobs, and makes you know, kind of across the board calculations based on all the things we know, taking out roads and taking out environmental areas and all those sorts of things. So that's where you get kind of what I say the growth plan numbers, if you will, which is that 79 that's in the official plan. But you'll see as you read other areas of the policies, there's some areas that we're suggesting higher densities than that, or some areas where we're suggesting lower densities than that. So there's the growth plan map that will or the growth plan map that will tick that box in terms of the fact that can you actually fit the people and jobs in the city? And then there's the other policies that tie into place, you know, that shows where that density and those people and jobs can go. So some areas it's going to be higher than that 79, and some areas it's going to be lower. But we're always going to be looking at those numbers comprehensively across the municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Any other questions or clarification for Ms. Banfield? I just had one, and it relates to both the comment about the secondary plan policies not continuing and the policies around transition. Is staff's intent well, the general question, how are staff handling the transition, I guess, from the current secondary plans to what's in this draft official plan? And related to that is the obvious question of what about all the stuff that's currently in the application process? How will new policies be applied, or the transition provisions be applied?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Lehman. So nothing in this official plan is intended to impact any existing approvals or projects that are going through the approvals process. So there aren't necessarily transition policies per se, but there, you know, as I said, if you've got an approval or you're going through an approval, and again, our new official plan is not going to be adopted tomorrow, so or approved tomorrow. So so naturally, as I said, there is no intention of having anything that's existing impacted by the new official plan. And then your second question, sorry, Mayor Lehman.
Well, it was related to the secondary plan policies. So how much of that work, that growth planning process over the last 10 years is being changed with this new draft plan, and how much of it was incorporated, even though the secondary plans aren't a separate chapter as they are in our current OP? How are all those policies and all that, obviously design and servicing work, being included in the new draft OP?
Again, thank you for the question. And so again, the same answer in terms of, I think it was Mr. McKinnon that said something about we've got shovels in the ground. Well, certainly shovels in the ground are not going to be impacted by our new official plan. And that's great. We want the shovels in the ground. You know, we did incorporate a lot of the same policies in the secondary plan areas and brought them into that growth management section in this new OP. There's probably a couple more that we can bring in to to give some of the landowners some additional comfort in terms of making sure that the things that were important to them and important to the city to carry forward will be carried forward. But the reality is that keeping the secondary plans as they are and with the densities that that is not going to get us closer to the 2051 numbers. And that growth, the growth and for people and jobs does have to get distributed across our built boundary and our designated greenfield area. And again, not in any intention of trying to impact additional existing approvals, but definitely we did need to look at it to be able to bring our numbers to those 2051 targets for people and jobs.
Okay. Well, definitely lots of issues for further discussion. I do want to thank all the members of the public who came out tonight to speak. We had a lot of issues from affordable housing and emissions, climate change raised, the sort of big citywide issues, future of work. Also lots of course, site-specific related to individual land owners or their representatives, and in some cases, people's concerns about how this sort of hits the road in detail. Maybe Ms. Banfield, just in closing for the meeting, could you outline what the next steps and the timeline is for the new official plan? Notwithstanding, I know there's a real appetite among many for another public meeting or at least a longer comment period. What's the current thinking on timelines?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. So, we really want to see what June 2nd brings. We're, fast and furiously accepting comments and the receipt. So the intent is always to tackle those comments and get into a third draft. And the intent is to bring something back to council in the fall. Now, fall's a long season, so I hesitate to say the season, but it'll be fall is the intent.
December 19th, right?
Well, that's what I asked someone earlier today. I'm like, what's the first day of winter? So definitely that. Certainly, I think at the start of the presentation where I said there's certain things we have to do, and there's a lot of things that we wanted to do to get additional feedback, and so we will absolutely take that comment back about having a second public meeting. Again, I think I have spoken to different people certainly saying that understanding a document of this size and releasing it on the normal council agenda cycle is not going to be released on a Wednesday or a Thursday for an adoption the Monday or Tuesday after. So we absolutely will factor in additional time for that. So as I said, so at this point, it's kind of looking at the comments, having those follow-up discussions that people have asked, and then we're happy to do. And as I said, still keep working towards fall, and we'll take back everything that we've heard today and do whatever we can to bring us all kind of closer together.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you to the staff team and, of course, consultants who have supported writing the official plan. I remember reading the original working papers, almost 2 years ago now, and I know there is a challenge in front of you, but we'll look forward to being part of the process, and I know all members of committee will have the opportunity to engage with staff over the coming months with what they're hearing and their reaction to the draft. So thank you again. With that, members of Planning Committee, we'll declare the public meeting concluded. I will ask if there are any inquiries of staff on planning matters more generally. Deputy Mayor Ward, do you have any inquiries?
I have none.
Members of committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned, and we'll see you for general committee.